Kevin Systrom is the founder and CEO of Instagram, the popular photo sharing service with over 15 million users. He's got a lot of great tips. Let's go talk to him. So I always like to start off with where you grew up. Like, where did things kick off for Kevin?
I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts called Holliston, Massachusetts. It's about 26 miles or so outside of Boston, right where the marathon starts.
Yeah. And so did you go to high school there?
Yeah, so I grew up there until freshman year, and then I went to private school in Concord, Massachusetts, which was about an hour away. And I was a day student there for about a year until we decided doing an hour back and forth every way wasn't worth it. So.
Was that at your own call on going to a private school, or was it kind of forced by parents?
Definitely not forced by parents. I still remember, like, everyone always asks me this, and I try to think back about the decision to go, and I'm not sure I remember. Like, I think it was kind of like an academic thing, but also something new and interesting. And it was an awesome school called Middlesex in Concord, and we just did a lot of fun stuff, and they had cool classes in computer science, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I went to a private school as well, but mine was forced. I remember just being like, all my new kid and all the like neighborhood kids were going to all the public schools, and so that sucked. But that's cool. So you studied computer science even back then, right? So in high school you started getting into computers.
I was a huge nerd.
Same here.
Yeah, starting at I remember starting at 12. I think we got our first computer in the house, and I was like a Doom 2 guy. Nice. I just Doom 2 the whole way, and I would edit levels, and that was how I got into it. Actually, I'll credit Doom 2 for everything.
Yeah, a lot of mine was Wolf 3D, and then the first Doom when that came out.
Wolf 3D was a couple of years before. Yeah,
I downloaded the Doom beta, and where the characters didn't move yet. And I was running around in this world, and I was blown away.
Right.
I mean, you remember the first time you saw 3D environments?
Oh yeah.
Like that, right?
Well, Doom 2 was right. It was one of the first games that did all sorts of graphics technology and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, so coding at that point, or no? What did they teach you? Was it Pascal or something, or what did you?
It's funny that you mentioned that. Actually, the first thing I learned was QBasic.
QBasic, I know QBasic.
Do you remember that?
I can code in QBasic right now.
Really?
Yeah, I probably could.
I definitely could not.
Are you serious? It's
no,
so
I would not
though.
Remember at all. I can do C and all that stuff. But
it was just quick basic, right? That's what they called it. It was just 10 go to 20, blah. It's
I still remember. I think it was my uncle who showed it to me and was like, "Oh yeah, you can do this thing." Because what I really wanted to do was ask people for their password, and I had to guess the password, and then it would say, "You guess the password." That was the first program I wrote.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I did some choose your own adventure, text choose your own adventure stuff.
You're way more advanced than I am.
Dude,
so.
I don't know about that. So cool. So you into computers, and were you into BBSs or online stuff then, or what? At what point did you start playing around with the internet?
Yeah, we had Prodigy in our house. Prodigy was you remember the counter to AOL.
Prodigy, AOL. Those are the three big ones.
I think we had CompuServe and we had Prodigy, but all the cool kids had AOL, and I still remember being on Prodigy, and but it was fun. There were chat rooms and stuff, but that got me connected to the internet. But I think the internet really started for me when we got AOL finally, and we used to make these programs to I got in so much trouble because you would make the programs in Visual Basic to boot other people offline. And
dude, everyone has this story.
Is everyone?
Who else did we talk to about it? Dennis Crowley, right? He was telling us about AOL hell. There was this program to boot. Dude, everyone has the same story. That's amazing.
Yeah, I can't remember the names of all of them, but I think that's because everyone had a password you had to enter in order to use it, and that's why you learned QBasic. Because
that's so funny.
Yeah. Seriously, I think that spawned an entire generation.
It totally did, because it got you excited about this secret little underground, and there were hacker tools available, and
we used to spit out IMs where it would make ASCII text and art stuff. Yeah,
I remember the ASCII text stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was cool.
But that really got me into computers and the internet. And by the way, at that time, the internet was not web pages and apps. It was keywords and AOL and chat, right?
Totally.
It was very, very early. And, only, as we approached high school did, I start really doing programming. I was very much QBasic and Visual Basic. And then getting to high school, I remember just taking so many computer science classes. And actually in high school, they waived my requirement of doing biology. I still, to this day, haven't taken a biology class. because they were just like, yeah, just do computer science. And I remember in my application to Stanford, I had to like call out why I had not taken human biology, and it was a big deal.
But. So then you went to apply for Stanford and got accepted there.
Mm-hmm. It's actually strange. I don't remember why we came out to the West Coast. I think my parents had been out to the West Coast, and they're like, oh, you'll love it out there. And came out and toured a bunch of places in California. I was like, there's no way I'm going to school on the East Coast. I was like done with winter, done with gray Januaries. And
what were you considering then, like Cal Poly?
No, I was
a big tech school as well, right?
I went to I saw UCLA. I saw Harvey Mudd. Do you know what Harvey Mudd is?
No.
It's the engineering school, outside of LA.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But Caltech, which was really interesting, and Berkeley and Stanford, and I applied early at Stanford and got in there very luckily. But
tell me about the environment at Stanford, because that's it's known as one of the best tech schools, if not like the best engineering school, right? Would you say that? That's
true? I don't know what the rankings are these days. Like SATs no longer add up to 1,600, right?
Yeah.
See, it shows how much I got right. But I think that Stanford is like one of the best places to meet engineers who are also really well-rounded people. Like the only place I've been on earth that you can meet someone who's like extremely smart, but also can like lead a team of people, right? And the environment at Stanford was very hardworking. They used to like describe it as like a duck. Like on the surface, you seem pretty calm, but underneath you're working really hard, right? The first class I signed up for was computer science at Stanford, and it was called CS106X. And the X was for like extreme. It was supposed to be like the entire year compressed into one quarter. And needless to say, like coming in as a freshman, I, just very quickly realized how hard, it could be. But we worked really hard, and I remember getting not a great grade and looking around and being like, well, I guess computer science isn't for me. But I still remember everyone in that class. And actually one of the people in that class works with us today on Instagram.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Awesome.
It really comes around. But I mean, great, intelligent people who work really hard, and a lot of entrepreneurs come out of there too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the best, I've heard of like farms to try and find great talent. People are always trying to figure out ways to get to the students at Stanford before they graduate and line them up for a job at, Google or Apple or wherever it may be. So, you graduate, you got your degree, you got your bachelor's in
management science and engineering, so not computer science.
Oh, okay.
I, at some point along the way, had decided that it made more sense to focus on like managing a company. So I did this management science major.
But you still had 2 years of coding?
Well, I mean, the real trick is that the entire time I was at Stanford, I kept coding on the side, just not taking the classes.
Gotcha.
And I tried to make a competitor to Craigslist that serviced only Stanford students, and that actually turned out really well. And we got like 8,000 of the however many people at Stanford we got to sign up, and it was great. And that was like my first kind of touching, with social startups. And that summer I ended up working at Odeo, which obviously went to become Twitter, but it was like my first taste of what entrepreneurship was.
So how did you get the job at Odeo then?
I was studying abroad in Florence one quarter, and it was the dead of winter, and I still remember the house I was in had like giant cement walls and had no Wi-Fi. Like Wi-Fi wasn't a thing that existed that much, in Italy at the time at least, and you had to go to the library to get Wi-Fi, and there was a library right around the corner. So I remember looking for an internship for that year and going outside in the snow with my laptop next to the library and like looking for startups. And Odeo was on the front cover of the New York Times website. And I was like, oh, this sounds cool. This Ev guy sounds cool. So I went to outside, mind you. This is like the best hack in the world, by the way, going to Whois and like looking up people's email addresses. Right. So I found Ev's email address that way and shot him a note, like sitting on the side of the street in Florence.
That's
and
crazy.
Yeah, exactly. And I, didn't hear anything back the first time, but a couple more, emails. He was like, all right, like we'll talk when you're back. So that's how I got in touch with him. And it actually, ended up working out really well, and had a great time with those guys.
Awesome. And so what was it like give me a little bit of your background of your experience at Odeo, because here's a startup that, was founded by Ev Williams, who had created Blogger before.
Right.
And this was kind of his second big startup, right? Were you there when things weren't going so well and they decided to turn it into Twitter, or had you already taken off by that point? Or was it just a summer internship? Was that it?
Yeah, it was a summer internship.
Okay.
So I was there for like 3.5 months, and I got to see it launch and the team grow from, I think it was like 4 or 5 people when I got there to, I think it was like 15 when I left or something.
So that's some good experience to be able to sit in.
Oh, it was great.
How important do you think internships are? Do you think like that's something you'd recommend to people looking to break into kind of this scene?
Totally. It's, you're not worried about your livelihood. You're not worried about getting a job that impresses your parents, right? Like all the stress is gone. It's a 3-month date with a startup. And if you, as an entrepreneur, can pitch yourself as something that's going to be super useful and not a liability, but instead like, listen, give me something to work on for 3 months. I'll make your life easier.
Is that what you said? You're just like, I'll take any task.
Yeah, anything. I was like, I kind of program, like, I do, some of this entrepreneurship stuff. We were learning entrepreneurship at the time, as much as you can learn it. But, I basically pitched myself as like, listen, how can I help? And I think that's the best way to do it as an entrepreneur and as a intern especially, because you don't have the experience of an engineer of 4 or 5 years that's going to scale a service, but you can do anything you can to help out. So
just whatever grunt work. Or
yeah, exactly. Like the best work I think is that grunt work, because like what I do day like after day at Instagram is that stuff, right? Like building a startup is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, as you know, right?
Absolutely.
And it's not all glory, and it's not, you're not doing great stuff all day, and it takes a lot of hard work. And I think an internship is like a fantastic way to learn some of that.
Mm-hmm. And so, you spent 3 months there. You go back to school at that point, finish up the degree.
Yeah.
I'm sure you were being heavily recruited at that point, right? Like most grads.
Well, it's funny because like that summer we toured. So I was part of this thing called the Mayfield Fellows Program at Stanford, and it's like 12 students every year to like learn about entrepreneurship. And that summer I was doing my internship at Odeo, and one of the companies called Uma that is, I think they're still around doing VoIP stuff. I met Sean Parker and a couple people from Facebook, and they were like, you should talk to Facebook. And I still remember that summer talking to Facebook and be like, should I drop out of school?
What year was this?
Sorry?
What year was this?
Oh, let's not get into that. I know where this conversation's going. It was 2000, it would have been 2005. Yeah.
This would have been a good time to join Facebook.
Right, I know. Well, I mean, listen, I remember talking to them and thinking it was awesome. And there was
Did you meet with Zuck and everything at that point?
Yeah. It was the decision, like, listen, I was not unique. Like, there were a lot of kids from Stanford getting, heavily recruited there. But I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just go and graduate. And I still look back at that experience, and I think, like, forget Facebook for a second. Being given the opportunity to go work for a startup without much risk at all, because I could have always gone back to school. I've learned so much in doing this startup at Instagram that I never learned at school. I'm not saying you should drop out of school. I'm more just saying that I think that would have been the opportunity of a lifetime for learning.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, internships are so important as well. But it was crazy, but anyway, like I ended up taking a job at Google after I graduated. And
what role did they hire you for?
it was called Associate Product Marketing Manager.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
That's not really programming then, right?
No.
Or do they require their marketing managers to program as well?
I'll tell you, like I remember applying, and I applied for the product manager job that I really, really wanted, and then I applied for the marketing job, which I was like, okay, cool. Like I have a lot of marketing experience, but like. I want to do this product thing because I love building products. Where did you get marketing experience from? I did a bunch of internships at like an ad agency on the Truth campaign, that anti-smoking campaign. And my mom has always been in marketing, so I've done stuff in high school, and then in college I did a lot of marketing stuff too. But besides the point, I really wanted to do the product manager job, but they were like, you don't have a computer science degree, so I don't know if they still have that requirement, but. I was, hugely bummed out that I couldn't do that, and I actually got an offer from Microsoft at the time for much, much more doing product management. But there was something about the Valley and something about Google that I really wanted to be part of, and I ended up really loving the marketing job.
I can't imagine going to work for Microsoft.
Well, I had a couple friends working for them, and
Were they having fun though? Or
I don't know.
Like, we work in Microsoft.
No, I think I was actually, it's funny because I was interviewing at for their photos group, and they were going to do this really cool like photo technology. And I remember meeting with all of them and actually being really impressed. But, you know, for girlfriend reasons and stuff, I wanted to stay in the Bay Area. And
that would have been a Seattle move then.
Yeah.
So, you know, you eventually leave Google and you start your first startup. So how many years at Google, and then when did you decide like, hey, now it's time to leave?
Well, you know, like I was talking about, I was doing the associate product marketing manager job, and I worked on Gmail and calendar and docs and spreadsheets, and I actually learned a ton about like, how do you talk about products? Like, how do you make products make sense to people? And I ended up moving to a group called Corporate Development, the group that buys all the companies at Google and invests in companies. And I decided that after about a year of doing that, I saw so many entrepreneurs having tons of fun starting companies that I actually jumped to a company started by some Googlers. It's called Nextstop. So I was there for about a year, and when I got to Nextstop, I was like, I want to learn to program again, and I want to cut my teeth. And I started as a marketing guy and worked my way. Like at the end, I was basically a full-time engineer working on marketing problems. Awesome. Yeah, it was cool, and it was a great opportunity. And that's when I decided to start Bourbon, which ended up becoming Instagram.
So talk to me about, you know, I'm really curious about Bourbon because I heard about it, and I remember Daniel Burka had downloaded it and tried it out or something, but I never got a chance to play with it before it became Instagram.
Right.
So what was the initial idea? And how did you go about raising money on this idea?
It's a really interesting story because I was the only one at Bourbon, and it was a check-in app. It was basically, you know, I won't sugarcoat it. It was a competitor to Foursquare at the time, and it was all HTML5, so you didn't need to download it. You just visited bourbon.com, and immediately you had this thing in your web browser that looked like an app, and you could check in. And
so would you do it from could you do it also on the desktop as well, or?
I guess you could if you like.
But it was meant
Safari.
for mobile use.
Yeah. So you opened up, you know, mobile Safari and you typed in bourbon.com, and it was like, boom, it looked like an app, acted like an app. You could check in. And as part of that, you could do two things. You could post videos and you could post pictures. And I remember sitting with Steve Anderson, who was our first investor from Baseline Ventures, sitting with him at the Grove in the marina. And he, you know, was like, oh, like, you know, I hear you have this thing, Bourbon. And I was really nervous. I was like, I'm meeting with an investor. And I had this thing set up actually that text messaged me every time someone joined. Mind you, today on Instagram, we have 2 people per second joining. So at the time, it was a scalable thing. Right now, it's not, right?
Right. It is. Your data plan would be...
Right, exactly. I actually moved to unlimited text because of that. So
you're fine now.
Yeah, I'm okay. I just can't get to sleep at night. Yeah. So I was sitting there, and I remember talking to him and pitching him the idea of this thing and showing him. And it literally would text me like this was like a Sunday, so it would text me like once every 5 minutes. And some of those people he knew. And he was like, all right, there has to be something here. Some of these people are signing up. And I left there with a commitment from him being like, listen, I'll put in $50K. We're going to do this. I remember going home and calling my parents and being like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to be in a startup, and we're going to do this thing. And I was like, $50K, that's like, you know, a whole bunch of funding, and I'm going to be able to do this for years. And long story short, in talking to a bunch of people, I got enough people excited that they wrote a check for $500,000 and, you know, worked on Bourbon. And right as we got funding, I was lucky enough to find my awesome co-founder, Mike, who is very much like the backbone of our company today. And we started Bourbon together. And we worked for about 6 or 7 months on Bourbon until we decided to do Instagram. But it all came back to what I said before, which was people loved posting photos. And we were so undifferentiated in the check-in space that we were like, let's focus on one thing. And that ended up being, you know, photos. And obviously that turned out pretty well.
Yeah, I'm curious as to, you know, was that a tough conversation to have? I mean, it was just the two of you, right, when you decided to make that switch. So I mean, did you guys go out and have beers and say, hey, this check-in thing it's too saturated, this isn't working?
We actually had so many people using the service. By so many, I mean like 80, but they were all our close friends. And they were all like, we love bourbon, don't ever stop doing bourbon. But I just couldn't bring myself to feel that it was going to be the thing that won. And we had a couple month process with Mike getting a visa, because he's actually Brazilian, where, you know, I was just kind of working on bourbon and waiting for Mike's visa to go through. And the day he joined, we sat down and I was like, I think we have to do photos. Mm-hmm. I remember the look on his face being like, I just joined this thing bourbon, I left my job, and now we're gonna do something else. And we actually worked on a prototype for about a week when he joined. And I think we have the code somewhere, it's terrible. And after a week, we decided there's no way we're doing photos because this is a terrible app. And we just hated it. It was awful. And we went back to building bourbon. And we revisited the idea like maybe a month or two later, because we were like, there's something to photos that keeps drawing us back. And the kicker really was in Mexico. I was on this, you know, short vacation because I was like, I have to clear my head. And I was with my girlfriend. And we were working on photos, and she was like, you need to make my photos look as good as all of those guys. And Greg, one of our engineers and a very close friend, takes these awesome photos with things like Hipstamatic and Camera Bag. And she was like, I don't feel like my photos look that great, right? So you have to build that in somehow. And anyway, Mike and I decided to build filters in over that vacation. And we came back, and the first filter ever was X Pro 2. And needless to say, like, that really helped us take off, because it meant that everyone could take beautiful photos.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was the big thing for me. I had actually, as an angel investor, had met with a handful of startups around that time. One, I can't remember the name of it,
Treehouse, yeah.
Was it Treehouse? They were just doing photos, right?
Right.
And I remember sitting down and meeting the guy, really great dude. And I looked at the photos, and I was playing around with it, and I was scrolling through, and it was something similar where you could take a photo and it would share with your friends.
Yeah, it was exactly the same.
And I was looking through a few people that had signed up that I knew, and it was like these really crappy photos. It was just standard flash hits food, you know, or whatever it may be.
Flash hits food, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
when
exactly.
Flash hits food, nothing good comes out of that.
No, absolutely.
It looks like crap.
Yeah.
And so I remember looking at that and just being like, I can't invest in anything like this, because it's not really compelling to me. And then I remember you were the first person I saw that tweeted out something, that was Instagram, and I was like, whoa, Graham got his own domain name. I thought, like, honestly, Instagram was his domain. And I saw it, come on, Toast. He's supposed to play tug of war.
Yeah, of course.
And I remember thinking, like, wow, I feel like I'm a professional photographer. And so do you think that must be the key feature, right? That is the one thing that really set you guys apart, where everyone was like, wow, not only is this quick to share with friends, but I also am making my pictures better than with the standard camera.
Yeah, we set out to solve 3 problems with Instagram. The first was we hated all the photos we were taking with the normal camera. It wasn't that they were bad, they were just, I guess the word is uninspiring. Remember, at the time I owned a iPhone 3G, so we're not talking iPhone 4S, we're not talking a gorgeous lens. It left something to be desired. And to a certain group of people, like, we saw, you look at the charts, we did our business school, research. We looked at the charts in photography, and the entire top 10 apps of free photography were all like filter apps of some kind.
Why didn't they add social to it?
Right? So, like, I remember sitting down and being like, well, I want a place to share our photos. And we saw Treehouse, and it's funny how, like, the people you think are going to be your competitors at the beginning are very different than the competitors now. And you looked at, and I mean, honestly, like, Treehouse was working on a very hard problem, and there are plenty of people before that tried to solve the same thing. I think the startup called Radar, like, everyone was trying to solve social mobile photos, right? I think the key was, like, how do you make people want to share on your network versus every other network in the world, right? Including Facebook, including Twitter. Like, what sets you apart? And I guarantee you, every person that signed up for Instagram on that first day thought it was a filter app, and that's it. But what we did was we bootstrapped the social network by allowing you to do the filters you wanted to, which, in my opinion at the time, definitely were some of the best filters out there. And I think that drew people to it. And
I still think they're the best.
Yeah. I think we've built on top of it, which is awesome. But at the time, like we had very basic filters. We had some terrible ones that we got rid of. But needless to say, like people got drawn to this because they were like, wow, like all of a sudden, not only can I take awesome photos, but I can share them. So that was the second problem. We wanted to allow you to share across multiple networks all at once. And the third one was like every single app we used before, it was like an eternity to take a photo and upload it, an eternity. And the one simple thing we did was like, while you were choosing a filter and filling out the caption, we started uploading it in the background. And you clicked done after, entering a caption, and then it was like, boom.
So it was only once you start putting in the caption.
Right.
So you have to choose a photo filter first. Okay.
Yeah. So while you're doing all this work, we uploaded it in the background, and everyone was like, how did you make that thing upload so fast?
Yeah.
And wasn't. We just hid all the, the slowness.
Yeah. So how much of the popular page do you think played into like the social and the tagging of photos and discovery? He's wanting to play.
He's bored. Yeah.
What do you think? How much of that is actually? How much does that even get used out of the average Instagram user? How many actually go over to the popular?
Yeah. So initially, the popular page was the key, right? It was like filled with people, because remember, like Instagram at the time was like 25,000 users the first day, but it was the place to find out that you could follow anyone from around the world, even if you didn't have a friend on the service. You could find someone to follow on this page.
I've used it actually a lot. I follow a lot of Japanese dogs.
Right. Yeah, that's right. I always see you liking all the poodles. Right.
We didn't have to bring that up.
Yeah,
but,
no problem. Nothing to be embarrassed about.
No, they're cool. They're breathtaking poodles, but they don't speak any English. And so the entire thread that I'm looking at is all in Japanese.
Yep.
I have no idea what to say, and I'm just like, cute dog, hee hee. And then that's like my contribution to it. But like, it's cool that you can like friend these people and don't even have the language in common, which is pretty awesome and unique.
It was probably, in many people's opinions, they think that Instagram was like one of the first truly international social networks. Because like the second you go on there, you can communicate with anyone via like, right? And even if they leave a Japanese comment on your photo, which definitely happened early on for me, right? There was something there because you were communicating via photos and imagery, right? That wasn't the case on Twitter, wasn't the case on Facebook or any other social network for that matter. And that really said something to us, which was like, this thing can function even if people don't speak the same language. And that added to like the escape velocity really of our initial, month, was that anyone anywhere in the world could use it.
And it allows you to explore like new lands and new cuisines and all different types of things. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, you launch this app, you get it out there, you get a 1.0, you got some filters. You have a lot of marketing background. Did any of that play into the success of the application, or was it just purely based on the features that you had developed?
I think it was a combination of both.
How did you market it? What like really made it take off?
So I wish I could show you. I have a screenshot somewhere of my drafts my drafts box in Gmail, and I literally had like 30 emails queued up that say hello from Instagram in the subject, and it's like tailored to everyone in tech, like literally everyone. Gruber, you name it. And I looked in our press kit the other day, and we had like a one-sheeter and a PDF that explained what we did. And I emailed each and every one of them thinking like, maybe we can get them on our beta or something. And surprisingly to us, about half of the people wrote back. And once we sent it to them, everyone loved it. They were like, this is awesome. I'm having so much fun. And the key was we let you share out to Twitter. So, Jack Dorsey, who I knew from Odeo, I was like, Jack, haven't talked to you in a while. We're doing this thing. If you want to use it, here you go. And he tweeted out, and I still remember seeing our wait list like climb every single time.
So you had a wait list. How did that work?
We just had a little like, put in your email, we'll send you a note when we launch. And I think it had like maybe 5,000 names on it when we launched. So not a ton, but I remember like going after people who were, big in design and photography on Twitter and saying, here, use this app. And I don't think every app can just do this, but I think what you have to do is find an app, find a crew that like loves what you're doing. And it just so happened that they loved the product and would tweet out about it. And it created this tension of like everyone who wanted this app that couldn't get it because it hadn't launched yet.
That's brilliant. They actually not launching is a good thing. So we did something similar with Oink, but we launched and then had the wall. And so all these people would go and install it, they couldn't get in, and they go and give it a 1-star review. And I'm just like, oh my God.
Whatever, but I mean, those are the things we learn from, right? Like you never do everything right the first time.
Absolutely.
And it's those experiences, right?
And you're never ever gonna get it right, no matter how many years you've been in the business doing this kind of stuff. Like it's always, you're gonna find some way to screw things up.
I feel very lucky that so far we've managed to do a lot of things exactly at the right moment, exactly at the right time, with the right combination of things. And as much as entrepreneurs want to take credit for each and every little decision and say it made complete sense at the time, I promise you a lot of it is luck. But you make your own luck by working really hard and trying lots and lots of things.
So tell me about how big is Instagram now, user base wise?
Over 15 million users, which is really exciting for us.
That's insane.
Yeah.
So any other service out there on the market today, I would say that has that many users. And I'm assuming a lot of those are still active, obviously. You said 15 million?
Over 15, yeah.
Over 15. Registered users? I mean, you're probably a team of 30 people, 40 people. I mean, any other service out there around that size, that would not be crazy. That might be a little small. How many people total are you?
We are just now 10.
10?
Yeah. But for the longest time, like up to like 10 million, we were like 5.
How do you, so talk to me about your definition of like lean startup and why you decide to keep, I mean, there's obviously more than you can handle right now. You're growing like crazy, scaling issues, all these press opportunities, like there's just so much to do. How do you do it with 10 people?
Hire really, really smart people. Really smart people.
And you take your time? Are you one of there's two different mindsets I've found. It's like there's people that hire fast and are quick to fire, or do you take your time and make sure it's really a right fit both culturally and technically? Or?
I mean, I'd be lying to say that we were doing anything except for the latter, right? But I think what we've realized is that you find really smart people with a lot of potential and you put a lot of trust in them. And that's why, over the last month and a half, we've doubled the team from, it was like 6 to, now 10, right? We are growing, I think, because we're learning that to accomplish, the grand vision of what we want Instagram to become, it's not going to be like Mike, Kevin, Shane, and Josh around a table of, 4 in the middle of a room trying to hack late into the night, right? That worked for a while. And probably too long. And
I think it's. I mean, you just said before we started taping that if your phone starts vibrating too much, you have to get up because you might have servers on fire or something like that.
Yes, it's true. I actually I still. I mean, a lot of.
you have 15 million users, and you're like the only one on call. And
no.
you're the CEO.
No. We're all on call. But I definitely wake up. I've missed a lot of birthday parties. I've missed a lot of dinners. I mean,
bring your laptop with you, bring your
I mean, you were the
Wi-Fi.
one who was like, early on, we were talking about having all these server issues and you were like, just get some MacBook Airs, get some like Wi-Fi things.
Well, that's because
we did it. It was the best thing ever, by the way.
We were sitting in Samovar, and I remember you guys had bad cell phone servers or something, and you're like, well, the servers might be up or down. I'm like, you guys need like a backup here. You need to get online.
We took your advice though, best advice ever, and to this day we have those little Mac Airs that are the little ones, the 11 inches or whatever.
Yeah, those are great. And
they are amazing because it means that anywhere we are, and I promise you, we've been in some weird places fixing stuff. Anyway, so we have a small team, and it means that we all have to be on call, and we probably lose a lot of sleep over it. But it really means that we focus on building product and the right features at the right time, and definitely means that things like Android, are taking longer than they would otherwise.
You developing that in-house?
And web, yeah. And but at the same time, I think had you asked me when we started, had you asked anyone when we started where we'd be a year out from launch, no one could have predicted the wild success and growth of what we've had so far. And for that, we're humbled. But at the same time, we don't try to second guess our strategy. What we do instead is we say, like, what's the best point from here on? And we focus on, like, how do we grow the team to become, the world-changing company that we want to be? Because we have so much to do. And if you look at where we're going and the growth and, like, 2 users per second or something, it's crazy. And you need a lot of people to support that. So.
Yeah, so you mentioned this grand vision and where you want to take things. A lot of people look at Instagram, they're like, this is my favorite way to take fun filters and share it with friends.
Right.
What's the grand vision that's bigger than filters and just sharing simple photos with friends?
Right. So I think you alluded to it a little bit before when you said you could explore the world, right? Imagine a service that collects all of the visual data that gets produced all around the world, right? So that you can tune in to any place on Earth and see exactly what's happening, whether that's, a friend's birthday party that you're missing, a wedding happening that you didn't, go to, or a riot breaking out overseas, or something as personal as like a baby's first steps, right? These are all moments that are happening around the world and that we capture with our cameras, right? And that's a visual media that, before was sitting on someone's camera phone and just sitting there. What happens in the world when you take all of that data and you combine it in a network, right? All of a sudden,
whether they know each other or not.
Whether they know each other or not.
So I'm at the football game the other night. There was probably, 49ers game. There's probably, a couple thousand people taking Instagram photos, but no common tag. But you had the timestamp.
Yep.
You had the GPS coordinates locked in the photo. You could bundle those together and make some way to visually browse through that stuff.
Right. So, imagine being able to tune into anything on Earth, right? Whenever it happens.
So tune in sounds like video.
It could be video, right, in the future. But that's why I describe us as visual media, because at the end of the day, it is about beautiful imagery, but it's really more about like useful imagery, right? And useful can mean beautiful, it can mean entertaining. And that's really what it's about, is like, how do you take all the visual data from around the world and bring it to one place, and what do you make of that? Right? Is it your way to get news now, right? Like, is it your way to share things with friends? Is it your way to experience events you wouldn't have otherwise? For instance, I follow Banana Republic and Burberry, right? Like, it's a new way of shopping, right? Because all of a sudden you're seeing things and products coming by, cool. Right?
Yeah.
Audi, like, I get to follow Audi's cars as they get launched, right? At car shows and stuff, they're taking photos of like R8s and crazy things. Like, it's not simply about, a latte and some art, right? It's more than that, because I can experience things from all different vantage points. And that's why I think, what we're doing is so extremely impactful in the long run, because it's a universal medium that allows you to explore the world. And that is something that the world's been asking for a long time.
That's awesome. So does that ride on top of Twitter? Or do you continue to always ride on top of Twitter, or do you eventually displace part of what Twitter's trying to do?
Well, so to me, like, and we have a lot of great friends at Twitter, like, I think we share a lot of DNA, like, we're in the same family, but it's kind of like two twins that do very different things, right? Twitter, I think, is an information network. It's a great place to get, news, breaking news, right? It's a great way to keep up on people's thoughts, right? It's like, in many ways, what people used to describe as microblogging. Instagram isn't about like how you're feeling or what you're thinking. Like, I think like a while back, the box used to say like, what are you thinking or something, right? Like, the box on Instagram isn't what are you thinking? It's like, what are you doing? Or like, where are you? Or what are you seeing, right? And, only a small percentage of our photos actually get shared out to Twitter and things like Facebook, which to us really signals that people are finding a very different and disparate home on Instagram that is in no way, a replacement for any of the other services that you have, but is creating a new vertical.
That matches my behavior quite well. Like, I still use Twitter for Twitter, Facebook for Facebook, and you sit somewhere in the middle there.
And no one knew, by the way, that opportunity existed.
Right.
I remember telling people we were going to do photos, and they're like, "Are you crazy? Like, why would you touch that?"
Right. Yeah, it's weird. Like, how many other opportunities do you think are out there? The problem is, like, if you were to look, if you didn't exist and someone came and pitched that idea to me and said, like, "Hey, we're going to sit there, we're going to be this new network," I'd be like, "Oh my God, I've heard this 1,000 times, right?"
Yep.
Like, do you just...
Oh, and we got that reaction from plenty of people.
Really?
I have the list of names of people who told us it wouldn't work. So.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
I tried to invest in you guys back in the
That's true.
day. I believe. Once I saw the product, I was like, I'm in.
Yep.
But I unfortunately didn't. but not because by choice. It's a long story.
By proxy.
By
okay.
proxy. I'm still in you through another fund, and it's all good. So who is competition then? If it's not Facebook and it's not Twitter, are you kind of by yourself? Is it Path? Is it,
Yeah. People ask, it used to be a really easy answer. Like you could say, when Path was doing photos and exclusively, you could say them. When Pick Please was around, you could say them. Like we could point to people and say, those are really close. But like all of those people have gone off and done something very different now, right? And you can't, and as we discussed, you can't really say Instagram in any way competes with Facebook or Twitter for like what they do, right? So you start looking at it really as like, it's a competition for time, right? Like where do people spend their time? And for that, like, I guess everyone's a competitor, right? But everyone's in that same boat. Every major service, right? We're all competing for time and a day part of people's days. But for us, I look at ourselves as our biggest competitor. Like our biggest job is to hire, is to build great product, and is to realize that vision that I discussed with you, right? I don't worry day in, day out about someone launching a competitive product with filters. I really don't. I worry about our ability to build the products that realize that vision that I described. That's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing to build a company. Like, I could give this advice time and time again, which is that a lot of people when starting a company think they're starting a product, right? And that's really kind of what you're doing, right? You're building a product to show traction, and you think, okay, I'm going to build a product. But really, in the long run, you have to build a company. And that's way harder than coding a few lines and building the design out. And I did all the design for our app, right? Like, I had to stop doing that and say to myself, like, okay, like we need an office, like we need to recruit people, and we need to think about vision, and we need to think about where we stand in the ecosystem. And that's building a company. And it's a very different mindset, a very different set of skills. And frankly, like you have to enjoy it, right? So, our biggest competitor is ourselves because we are building a company now. It's not about product competition.
Yeah, no doubt. Before we wrap things up, one of the things that I always ask guests on the show is to give me just a couple pieces of advice for would-be new entrepreneurs. Something that you've done completely wrong, that you really screwed up, that you're like, if I had to go back in time, I'd fix this one thing over the last few years. And then just something that you've taken with you and you continue to take with you in new startups that you did really right, that you would like to pass on to other people.
Yeah. I think the thing, like, what did we do really wrong? I think launching as early as you can. Had we launched Bourbon, we stayed in private beta way too long.
How long is too long?
It was like 8 months or something since the first day we, coded a line. I remember thinking, oh, we'll do it next week because like we'll have this new feature. It was like this worry of like, if I put it out there, we're gonna get judged. And it turns out like you want to fail if it's going to fail, right? Like you want to get that feedback, and that fear of like putting something out and having it being rejected from someone is terrible, right? But at the same time, it really teaches you like, listen, like go do something else or focus on something else. By launching it, we were able to focus on the fact that people love sharing photos, right? And that's why we focused on photos, and that's where Instagram came from. If I could give any advice, it's like stay away from this private beta stuff. Like put it out there, find the people that are vocal about what you're doing and put it in their hands and listen to them, listen to what they're excited about. And then in terms of like something we did really right, it was by focusing on solving problems. I think far too many startups are technologies in search of a problem, right? They're like, oh, I guess Google Maps exists and I guess tweets exist, so let's mash them up and do this like geolocation tweet thing. No offense to anyone doing that exactly. Honestly, I made that up. But I think too many people don't focus on problems people have. And I mentioned those 3 problems before about making photos beautiful, about allowing you to share them on multiple networks, and then finally making uploads go really quickly, right? Solve problems that people have. And we focused on 3. We weren't like trying to reinvent the world of photography. We were just like, let's focus on these 3 humble, simple problems. And that's what turned Instagram from simply yet another network trying to tackle this photos thing to something people used. And that was the fundamental difference. I think probably the first time you used it was like, it solved these 3 problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would, give that advice to any entrepreneur, which is like, what are the 3 problems you're going to solve?
How about in that vein, do you think that for me personally, it's been really easy to see scope and feature creep. And then all of a sudden you're like, look at the list and you're like, wow, we're taking on 20 things. Do you try? It seems like you've been pretty slow to launch new features.
Yeah.
Are you really taking your time and making sure you're going after the right things?
I don't believe in I think too many startups, the goal is to maximize features. I had one VC come up to me and was like, you guys haven't really launched any features in the last year. Is that a problem? I was like, dude, do you know how much work we've done on the product to make it scale to where it is today?
Right.
The things you launch that end up making the difference are not yet another feature that no one's going to use. It's what can you go really deep on, right? What we went deep on was scaling to over 15 million users, which in retrospect is hopefully the tip of the iceberg, right? Mm-hmm. We added hashtags, right? That was a huge thing that didn't exist. It allows you, hello toaster. It allows you to, discover.
You added a toaster filter.
Right? I added a toaster filter. We added new filters. We made our filters fast, right? We said, what do people love about the product and how can we make it even better?
Yeah.
We didn't say, what do people love about the product? Let's add a bunch of shit, right?
Yeah.
It was a very, focused effort to make the product better.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. Well, it takes a lot of discipline too. And frankly, only having, back in the day, 2-3 engineers, made us focus on those problems. Mm-hmm. And I think if anything, that wasn't our Achilles heel. It was, the thing that made us shine. And, for that, I definitely want to, if I do this again, hire more people more quickly. But I think focus is key.
Awesome. Kev, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it.
it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to you soon.
Cheers.